Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. Family and friends of an Indigenous woman murdered in a Winnipeg rooming house on the weekend are calling for more supports for women trying to escape dangerous circumstances. Brittany Hobson has this story.
Those closest to Norma Andrews knew her as Bambi. The 28-year-old is Winnipeg's latest homicide victim. Her body was found in this Winnipeg rooming house in the city's West End on Saturday.
I don't want anyone else to lose their loved one like this. So I think, like the system needs to change, and where they're being lodged and where they're being stayed.
Family met with reporters Wednesday morning, where they said Andrew's living situation made her fear for her life.
She had told us numerous times about concerns about the boarding house where she was living. People were climbing through her windows and kicking in her door. Norma was concerned for her safety in the place where she was living. She was scared.
A vigil was held outside the home Monday evening. Andrews was raised in Mantosipi Cree Nation in northern Manitoba before moving to Winnipeg. She was a mother to 3 young sons. Andrews' stepmother, Amber Scott, says Andrews faced struggles but attempted to access services to improve her life.
Institutions and systems failed Norma. She did not have the support she needed. We can't say for certain that improved services would have saved her life, but she did seek out help several times in the past and was rejected.
Manitoba Kiwi-Tinawi Ogimakanak has been helping the family. Hilda Anderson-Pierce is the manager of the organization's MMIWG liaison unit. She says the death of an Indigenous woman is felt across Turtle Island.
When we experience a loss, we mourn as a nation. Every nation is impacted when we hear that one of our mothers, daughters, sisters, aunties, cousins, friends has died as a result of a homicide or has gone missing in an urban area.
Anderson Pierce says vulnerable women are being targeted. She's calling on all levels of government to implement the National Inquiry's calls for justice. Winnipeg police say the investigation is ongoing but would not provide further information. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
It was a busy weekend in the Northwest Territories, and for once we aren't talking about politics. Our reporter Charlotte Mort-Jacobs traveled to Crete Cho territory as community members watch the end of an era.
After today, you won't see a crowd gathered here. It's the very last hand games tournament to be played at the historic Cultural Center in the heart of Bechecan. The building went up in 1989 and will be demolished this week. For many here, it holds fond memories.
Just to see the building go is actually going to be heartfelt for a lot of people, but like I said, we're in modern days now. We're actually going to need a bigger building, something where we can actually have more people to actually come in, and we're actually going to have display cases for the new building that's going to be coming in of pictures of this old building.
Richie Martin of Bechecan says needing a new and bigger building is a sign of a strong connection to hand games. Every March, the community swells from 2,000 to 5,000 people over one weekend.
Back in 2005, we actually had the first tournament here held in March, and that was just straight men's back then. It was 18 over for the first tournament.
And now what do you see it as?
It's just more and more youth playing every year. We back in 2007 is when I actually started playing hand games. In 2008 is when we changed the age limit from 16 and over, and after that there was just more youth interested in playing hand games.
What's that?
This is a microphone. And one thing you can always count on, kids everywhere.
I remember I was probably like these kids running around here. I remember playing around, jumping around as they were building it, and excited to see how it would come to turn out and stuff. And it's pretty nice. It's been here a long time.
But it's not all play. These gatherings, which bring the Crete Cho communities together, or a breeding ground for passing on Dene laws to the next generation.
Knowing our language, our culture, what our ancestors used to do back in the day.
Land claim negotiations, feasts, and hundreds of weddings have all graced the center.
My sister actually got married here too. It was memorable because that was like the last time my dad was drum dancing in the building.
The building is being demolished due to aging and mold, and public consultations are being held to plan for a new center. For now, all that's left will be the memories. Charlotte Mort Jacobs, APTN National News, Bechecal.
An APTN investigation into the child welfare system in Northern Ontario reveals a shocking number of deaths in care.
We'll have that story after the break, but first, here's tomorrow's weather.
To the east coast, we've got 17 and rain in Charlottetown, 21 and sunny in Fredericton. Happy Valley, Goose Bay and Cartwright are 13 degrees, mostly sunny skies, and Pinocchio 11 in cloud. Gaspis 18 and mix of sun and cloud, 20 and rain in Montreal. 18 and rain in Ottawa, 20 and mostly sunny skies in Toronto. 14 and sunshine in Sioux Lookout, 16 and sunny in Thunder Bay. God's Lake will be rainy and 10 degrees. Puckatawagan will be a mix of sun and cloud and 7. 14s for Barons River and Princess Harbour, 14 and rain for Dauphin and Brandon. Swift Current will be cloudy and 13 degrees, 10 in Yorkton, 11 and rain in Saskatoon. Uranium City's got some sunshine, 6 degrees, 10 and sunny in Larage, 10 and raining in Meadow Lake. Welcome back. A shocking number of Indigenous children are dying connected to Ontario's child welfare system, and it's mostly in Northern Ontario. APTN's Kenneth Jackson has spent months investigating and brings us death as expected.
Every 3 days, a child connected to care dies.
It was somewhere around 9 in the morning, and all he said was, "The baby turned blue. We're on our way to the hospital."
Nothing the government can do can make up for the wrongs it consciously perpetrated against kids. And I want to emphasize that. It was conscious. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an accident.
Brianne Leclerc's late son, Kyler, was in what's known as a kinship out of care agreement. That means an agency was involved, but he was living with relatives. In his case, Delico Anishinaabe Family Care ordered Kyler to live with his white father. That was in January 2014. To this day, it's difficult for Brianne to talk about.
My ex and his mom agreed to sign for the kinship. So if you sign this document, they've agreed to let you go with the baby, or we're going to give him the baby.
That arrangement broke down quickly and she had to move out, forced to leave Kyler behind. Then one morning, her phone rang.
It was somewhere around 9 in the morning. I got, my phone rang, and I had my ex's number saved as don't answer, but I figured I should answer. And all he said was, "The baby turned blue. We're on our way to the hospital." I was like, what do you mean the baby turned blue?
As Brianne rushed to the hospital, she called her Delico worker.
And I just screamed into the phone, and I told her, I said, "If anything has happened to him, this is on you. This is your fault. You made this choice. This is your decisions that
Then she entered the room and saw her baby on a hospital bed.
I could hear, machines are just beeping. There's people, running, moving over each other. There's, I think, 3 or 4 detectives in the room. There's, 5 or 6 nurses and the doctor. I couldn't, I wasn't really aware of what was going on until, I saw him.
Kyler was gone. His father left him on a cluttered adult bed to take a shower. He was found lifeless 30 minutes later. Brianne and her family tried to hold someone accountable and wrote letter after letter to Delico. The caseworker wasn't a licensed social worker, so they couldn't even try to hold her to account at the Ontario College of Social Workers. Then finally, the coroner's report came nearly a year later. The coroner found the sleeping arrangement unsafe, but the death was undetermined. The coroner couldn't pinpoint the exact cause of death.
I got his autopsy report February 15th, 2015. And that's the undetermined line where no one has to face anything.
In fact, 102 Indigenous children died between 2013 and 2017. 102 over 5 years. It's a startling number. And 72 of these deaths happened in Northern Ontario involving Indigenous child welfare agencies. Most were suicides or undetermined. That's a word you'll hear quite a bit. Undetermined. And our investigation shows that these agencies were underfunded by hundreds of millions of dollars by the federal government. That includes Alicia Jacobs' son, Talon Nelson, who died in a crowded crib in a Thunder Bay foster home 6 months before Kyler. Talon was 3 months old. APTN found Alicia in early August. The death eventually forced her to the streets and everything that comes with it.
Undetermined cause of death. Too many stuffed animals in a fucking sleeping environment.
We agree to meet the following morning after a night's rest. She speaks about her struggles and Talon's father, who hit drugs hard and is in prison now for murder. But it's as fresh today as it when it happened nearly 5 years ago.
He's innocent. He's innocent. I can't do this again. You didn't even have a chance. You need to come from me. I can't do this again.
Okay. It becomes too much. She can't talk anymore. This is child welfare at its worst. Death of a child and a broken mother lost on the streets of Thunder Bay. Talon and Kyler were two of at least 4 babies to die in 7 months under the watch of Delico. At least 3 were in unsafe sleeping environments. No one, it appears, to have ever been charged. We tried to get Delico on camera, but after multiple conversations, it never happened. So we went to the Chief Coroner of Ontario for answers.
The death of infants is a very challenging area in death investigation generally, because in sudden and unexpected deaths of infants, so infants under age 1, we often, unfortunately, upwards of a significant percentage of time, do not find a cause of death.
The autopsy simply doesn't show evidence of a baby suffocating, even accidentally, he said.
The truth is we don't know. And so we want to, and we use a term undetermined, which is kind of a harsh term, but it means we don't know. So we say we don't know. We say that the environment may have been a factor, but we don't know that it was the factor.
Delico isn't alone in this. Other Northern Ontario Indigenous agencies have had multiple children die under their watch, like Tikanagan Child and Family Services and Sioux Lookout. Kanana Sioux Turtle died by suicide in 2016. The following year, Jolene Winter, Amy Owen, both by suicide, and Tammy Kiash by drowning, all within 6 months. A special report from the coroner in 2018 looked into these deaths and found the Ontario government's child welfare system as a collective was completely to blame. Lack of trained staff, lack of services, lack of everything. One of the experts on that report was this Ryerson University professor and a leading expert in child welfare who questioned safeguards in Northern Ontario.
We're going to take a child to a place of safety, and then they need to have a safe place to sleep.
Professor Snow says she has seen a different level of safeguards in the north compared to the south. Her work as an expert has allowed Professor Snow access to agency files through various investigations.
Why would I not likely see this in Toronto? Well, in Toronto, we'd have standards, and workers would be required to go and assess the quality of the bedroom. And then, in fact, they'd measure how much room the child has to make sure there was an adequate sleeping environment for the child. And then we go up north, where we have structural inequity, such that we don't have the same standards of care for kids in the north.
Funding has always been an issue, but to what point? We obtained data from the Ontario government to find out, and focus on the 5 years between 2013 and 2017. That's the same time frame with 102 deaths. The government data details everything from the type of care used by agencies to the funding each receive. Professor Snow and her team analyzed that data for APTN. They focus on 3 Indigenous agencies in Northern Ontario where APTN has confirmed deaths occurred under their care.
You have less funding, you have less qualified staff, you have more crisis kind of response, and you have to often fly people from one place to another to provide a place of safety.
Professor Snow found these 3 Indigenous agencies were underfunded by approximately $400 million during the 5-year period.
And the end result is that kids die. Kids are always at the epicenter of structural inequity.
And that's no surprise to Cindy Blackstock. It's largely because of Blackstock that the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found Canada guilty of systematically underfunding on-reserve child welfare. Canada funds 93% of on-reserve child welfare in Ontario. Based on that order, Canada began retroactively providing funds to 2016. But you can't go back in time and save any of these children, no matter how much money you throw at it.
Children died waiting for Canada. That's the problem with them saying, oh, well, we're making good first steps and we're be patient with us. The reality is that children's lives are really on the line while we're waiting, and many children lost their lives during the time we litigated this case and for the many years before when they had a chance to fix it.
The Trudeau government also squeezed in new legislation last spring for Indigenous child welfare. But the day it was announced, the Minister of Indigenous Services didn't have a lot of details, particularly when it comes to money.
We'll see. I mean, and this is one of the things we were talking about, questions and answers. So many of the answers that any one of us would give you right now is we'll see. This is uncharted territory. This is what it is to have pioneering legislation.
This worries Blackstock, as it's another example of the feds not funding child welfare properly.
My worry is that we need to really make sure that Canada's not using C-92 as an escape hatch for its fiscal responsibilities to First Nations children.
You mean like, okay, here's your jurisdiction, here's you have all control.
But no money to implement your program. Yeah. And you're dealing with families who have, are bearing the weight of multi-generational trauma from residential schools, from colonialism writ large, so the starvation policies, the taking of land, the taking of resources, 60-scoop child welfare, all things Canada was directly involved with, and they're going to hand it over to First Nations and say, good luck. I think that's wrong.
What APTN has reported so far in this story just skims the top. And if you are this man, you know it all too well.
To be aware in some ways is to be in a constant state of outrage.
Erwin Elman was the first and last Ontario child advocate. The first move the Doug Ford government made on child welfare was to close his office. But when he first started a decade ago, he noticed something.
Every 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, a child connected to care dies. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, a child's died. Connected to the system that's meant on all our behalf to protect them.
As for Brianne, she is telling her story for one reason.
I hope that it doesn't happen to another baby.
Kenneth Jackson, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Really devastating and important work there by Kenneth Jackson.
Yeah, he's worked very hard on that.
Coming up, we'll take you to a fundraiser for those fighting fires and government policies in Brazil.
But first, here's the rest of Thursday's weather forecast. To northern Alberta, we've got 8 for Peace River, Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, rain up there. 11 in rain in Edmonton, 15 in rain in Lethbridge. Kamloops will be rainy and 17 degrees, as is Camel River, 16 in rain in Vancouver. Sandspit's 14 and rainy, a mix of sun and cloud in Prince George and 11 degrees. Whitehorse will be 8 and rain, Watson Lake 8 and rain as well. 7 and a mix of sun and cloud up in Norman Wells, Watees 5 and mostly sunny skies. Inuvik is 4 and rainy, Fort McPherson a mix of sun and cloud and 6. Baker Lake will be snowing and 0 degrees. Chesterfield rain and 7. 7 for Clyde River and cloudy skies. Resolute -5 and snow and sunshine up in Iqaluit 7 degrees.
Welcome back. A charity benefit held this weekend in Montreal raised over $3,000 for a group of Amazonian warriors working to fight rainforest fires and genocidal policies in Brazil. Lindsay Richardson has more.
As fires raged in the Amazon rainforest, darkening the streets of Brazil, a global movement began to form to protect the lungs of the earth.
People united will never be defeated. Enjoy your night.
In Quebec, 8,000 kilometers away, Indigenous women heeded the call to action and mobilized to raise funds.
Women are just known naturally to work very fast when it comes to coordinating things, getting things together.
A seasoned environmental defender, Shannon Chief joined forces with a host of community organizations to bring together an expansive charity showcase and traditional feast in just over 3 weeks.
Once you start meeting or connecting yourself to the people down south and they shared with you all these different things that are going on, then you kind of carry something in a way where you just want to be able to help in any way possible.
For those hailing from Brazil, it was a chance to share cultural values overshadowed by the country's divisive leadership, all the while affirming the crucial role of Indigenous women, young and old, in both environmental and territorial resistance.
Il y a, je pourrais dire, l'horreur et la beauté dans ces processus.
Despite the persisting scourge in her home country, Alessandra Dvolsky, co-founder of a Brazil-Montreal collective, says it's hard to be unmoved by the tenacity of women in the Amazon fighting for their inherent rights.
Ce sont des femmes qui vont établir des mouvements vraiment grassrooted. Ce sont des femmes qui comprennent que les mouvements sociaux, ils vont commencer d'en bas en haut.
The proceeds from Saturday's event, just over $3,000, will directly benefit an all-female association of Amazonian warriors, working to promote empowerment and self-determination in the northern state of Rondônia.
Ces femmes-là, elles ont vraiment une capacité, je pourrais dire, qui n'a pas de fin, de lutter contre ce genre de régime autoritaire.
Aside from the financial contribution, Chief says the event will continue to have positive implications. She's planning to show footage of the performances and speeches to a delegation of Indigenous women in Panama as proof of collective impact while working to plan a possible World Water Summit in 2020.
I think the most important thing today about being a woman is being aware of what's going on in the world and just trying to do something about it.
Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
And before we go tonight, a tribute to a true pioneer in the broadcasting history of Indigenous people. He was called Wild Bill Flamond. Wild Bill passed away Tuesday. He was a classy guy in the world of classic country music, a disc jockey all over the United States and Western Canada, including at CKDM in Dauphin, Manitoba, and CFRY in Portage la Prairie, back when Kitty Wells, Porter Wagner, Whisperin' Bill Anderson, and Bill's old friend, Georgie Jones, ruled the charts. In his other life, he was an Aboriginal rights advisor and strategist with groups like the Manitoba Métis Federation and the National Indian Brotherhood. Bill Flamond was 75 years old.
Sad news.
Yeah.
That is your APTN National News for this Wednesday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca.
That's where you'll find much more on Kenneth Jackson's investigation into the child welfare system in Northern Ontario. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks for tuning in.
And I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. See you back here.